I never thought I'd end up here, telling this kind of story. It still makes my chest tighten when I think about it, like I've crossed into some territory I swore I'd never touch. But the truth is, it happened, and pretending it didn't won't erase the way it made me feel. I've been in care work for years, helping people recover, guiding them through therapy, touching bodies not in a romantic way but in a professional one. This is what I do. It's always been about routine, steady hands, calm voice, a wall between my emotions and theirs. I was proud of that wall, but walls don't always hold. The first time I met Daniel Harris, I thought he was just another assignment. His wife had hired me to help with his recovery. He was polite, quiet, older than me by more than a decade, with a face that carried the kind of tiredness you see in people who've lived hard and lost pieces of themselves along the way. His body looked strong but worn down, like it was holding secrets it didn't want to share. I remember the way his eyes flicked up at me when I walked into the room that first day. He didn't smile right away. He just looked steady, like he was measuring me. And for some reason, my pulse jumped. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. I'd been in plenty of rooms with men before, helped them stand, stretch, move through pain. It had never felt like this. I started with the basics, breathing exercises, gentle stretches, keeping my tone professional. My hands rested on his forearm as I counted out slow movements. His skin was warmer than I expected. He inhaled, deep, almost too deep, and I realized my own breath had slowed to match his. "Good," I said softly, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Just keep that rhythm." But the air between us felt different, heavier somehow. At one point, I leaned in to adjust his shoulder. My hair slipped forward, brushing against his chest. I didn't mean for it to happen, but when I felt that slight contact, I froze. His body stiffened under my touch, and I could hear the quick hitch in his breath. I pulled back instantly, cheeks burning, trying to remind myself I was a professional. Still, I couldn't shake the way my stomach flipped when I felt his warmth that close. "Sorry," I murmured. He only shook his head, voice low. "Don't be." It was nothing. 2 words, but it lingered in me far longer than it should have. Later. As I helped him shift positions, the towel draped over his lap slipped off the edge of the chair and fell to the floor. I bent down to grab it, but he moved at the same time. His hand reached out, his fingers brushing mine as we both caught the fabric. Just a touch, just skin against skin for barely a second. But I swear it jolted me, like a spark climbing up my arm. I looked up at him, startled, and found his eyes locked on mine. Neither of us moved. His fingers could have let go instantly, but they didn't. For one suspended moment, it was just us. The towel caught between our hands, his gaze holding me still. My face burned. I pulled back too quickly, the towel slipping out of my grasp. "Thank you," I said, my voice too sharp, too rushed. He only nodded, the corners of his mouth curving into something I couldn't quite call a smile. The rest of the session passed like a blur. My instructions tumbled out of my mouth almost automatically, but inside, I was rattled. Every time I had to touch him again, I felt my fingers tremble just a little. When I helped guide his arm into a stretch, his muscles tightened under my hand. When I pressed gently against his shoulder to correct his posture, I could feel the heat rising through my own skin. I hated that I noticed. I hated that part of me wanted to notice. By the time we finished, my body felt both restless and drained. I gathered my things quickly, eager to escape before I did something stupid. But just as I reached the door, his voice stopped me. "Emily." I turned, hand on the knob. He was watching me, his eyes unreadable, his voice calm but weighted. "Thank you," he said again. But this time, it didn't sound like a simple thank you. It felt personal. Too personal. I nodded, forcing a polite smile. That's my job. When I left the room, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might echo in the hallway. I spent the rest of the day replaying it in my head, the brush of my hair against his chest, the way his fingers had lingered on mine, the look in his eyes when I pulled back. I tried to scold myself. You're imagining it. You're overthinking. You're a professional. But no matter how hard I tried, the images kept flashing back. That night, lying in bed, I told myself to let it go. I should have forgotten it like any other awkward moment on the job. But the truth is, I didn't. I remembered how his skin felt under my palm. I remembered the weight of his gaze, and I couldn't deny it anymore. Something had started in that room, something I shouldn't want, something I should be running from. But instead, I lay awake in the dark, my body restless, my mind replaying the spark of his touch, over and over until sleep finally claimed me. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning, the first slip, the first break in the wall I thought would protect me, the wall I'd built for years, keeping me safe, keeping me in control. And with just a touch, Daniel Harris had found the crack. The next morning, I told myself it would be different. I would keep things professional. I would draw clear lines and stick to them. But when I stepped into his room again, all my careful promises wavered. Daniel was already sitting up, waiting for me. He looked steadier than before, a little more alert, his gaze following me as I set my bag down. There was something about the way he watched, quiet but deliberate, that made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. "Morning," I said lightly, forcing a smile. "Morning," he echoed, his voice low. I busied myself with checking his chart, arranging the bands and small weights we'd use, anything to avoid that gaze for too long. But even as I moved, I could feel him watching me. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded, and I guided him through the first set of stretches. My hands on his shoulders, my voice calm, measured. I told myself this was no different than any other patient. But then his breath hitched again as I pressed gently on his back to correct his posture, and I felt that same heat rise inside me. I pulled my hands away quickly, pretending to adjust the strap on my wristwatch, anything to hide the flush creeping up my neck. We moved on to leg exercises. I steadied him as he stood, one arm around his waist, the other guiding his thigh through the slow movement. His body leaned heavier on me than expected, and for a moment, his chest brushed against my shoulder. My breath caught. I tried to focus on the count. 1, 2, 3. He stumbled, just slightly. And in the split second it took me to catch him, I lost my balance too. My body tipped forward, colliding with his. The impact wasn't rough, but it was enough. Suddenly, I was pressed against him, my palms flat on his chest, his arm instinctively wrapping around my back to keep me from falling. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I could feel the rise and fall of his breathing under my hands, the steady thump of his heart. My cheek was so close to his shoulder I could smell the faint scent of soap clinging to his skin. "Are you okay?" His voice was rough, close to my ear. "Yes," I whispered, though my pulse was hammering in my throat. I should have pulled away instantly, but I didn't. Not right away. His arm lingered at my waist, just enough pressure to remind me he was holding me there. I knew it wasn't necessary anymore. I'd found my balance. Still, I stayed for a fraction longer than I should have, suspended in that dangerous closeness. When I finally stepped back, my hands trembled. I busied myself with the weights, desperate to cover the silence. "Sorry," I muttered. "For what?" His tone was almost amused. I gestured vaguely, not daring to meet his eyes. "You don't have to apologize," he said quietly. "It happens." I nodded, pretending to focus on the straps, but my chest was tight. "It happens." That should have been the end of it. But the way he said it, low, almost deliberate, made it sound like something else entirely. The session dragged on, or maybe it flew by. I couldn't tell. Every touch, every adjustment felt charged, like an invisible current hummed between us. When I guided his arm through a stretch, his fingers brushed mine, holding on a second too long. When I knelt to secure a band around his ankle, I felt his eyes on me, and it made my skin burn. By the time we finished, my head was buzzing. I told him I'd see him again tomorrow, my voice sharper than I intended, like I was scolding myself more than him. I thought leaving would give me relief. It didn't. All afternoon, I replayed the stumble in my mind, the moment our bodies collided, the press of his chest against mine, the way his arm had curved around me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I hated that it made me ache, hated that I remembered the warmth of his breath so close to my ear. That night, I lay awake again. I told myself it was nothing, an accident. But the memory wouldn't let go. My body remembered too well the steadiness of his hold, the way I hadn't rushed to pull away. I tried to bury the thought, but by the time morning came, I was restless, raw, and strangely eager to see him again. The third day started the same. I told myself this time I'd be careful, but when I walked in, he smiled. Not a full grin, but enough to send a ripple of unease through me. "You came back," he said. "It's my job." I answered quickly. I tried to sound professional, but it came out too defensive, too nervous. He just nodded, as if he knew better. We went through the motions again, stretches, controlled breathing, slow steps. But the rhythm was different now. Every time I reached for him, I hesitated, aware of how close I was. And every time I touched him, I could feel him respond. Subtle shifts in his breathing, the faint tightening of his muscles under my hands. At one point, as I adjusted his wrist, his fingers curled lightly around mine, not gripping, not obvious, just a gentle hold, like a test. My pulse spiked. I didn't pull away fast enough. I finally slipped my hand free, heart pounding, pretending not to notice, pretending it hadn't happened. But I noticed. God, I noticed. Halfway through, the door creaked. My chest seized. Another staff member poked her head in, smiling politely. "Just checking in. Need anything?" "No, we're fine," I said too quickly. She left, the door closing softly behind her. I turned back to Daniel, and he was still watching me with that steady gaze. His lips twitched into the faintest smile, like he was amused by my panic. "If you pulled your hand away slower," he murmured, "she might have thought something else." My face burned. "Don't joke about that," I snapped, sharper than I intended. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Just let the silence stretch until I had to look away. By the time I left that day, I was rattled beyond reason. The touches, the looks, the almost collisions. It was too much. But when I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, all I could think about was the weight of his arm around my waist, the warmth of his chest under my palms, and the way he'd whispered so close to my ear. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop wanting to feel it again. By the third day, I told myself I was losing my grip. Every time I touched him, it felt heavier than it should. Every brush of his skin stayed with me too long. I thought maybe I could shake it off if I stayed cold, kept my distance, but when I walked into that room and saw him waiting, upright, shoulders straighter, eyes brighter, something inside me faltered. He was getting stronger. I should have been proud of that. That was my job after all, but instead, all I could think was how much more dangerous it made him look, stronger, more confident, and God help me, more attractive. We went through the stretches, the careful movements. I tried to keep my voice even, but my pulse kept betraying me. At one point, he stumbled just slightly. I caught his wrist to steady him, and his fingers closed around mine, warm and deliberate. It should have been nothing, a natural response, but it wasn't. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe, and that's exactly when the door opened. I froze. Standing in the doorway was a woman, tall, composed, with sharp features that softened only around the eyes. She wore her hair pulled back, every strand neat, not a piece out of place. And in those narrowed eyes, I saw something colder than any word she might have said. His wife. "Laura," Daniel said, his voice casual, as if nothing at all were wrong. He let go of my hand too slowly, like he wanted her to see. My face burned hot. I pulled my hand back instantly, stepping away, fumbling with the chart on the desk as if it could shield me. "I didn't know you'd be home this early," he added, smiling faintly. Her gaze flicked from him to me, lingering just a second too long on the space between us. She didn't smile. "I thought I'd check in," she said evenly, her tone polite but edged. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to straighten. "We're almost finished," I said, my voice too quick, too practiced. She nodded once, stepping into the room. Her presence filled the space in a way that made my skin tighten. She moved closer to him, resting a hand on his shoulder as if to stake a claim. He only leaned back, relaxed, as though he was enjoying the tension. "I'm glad you're taking care of him," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "It looks like he's in good hands." The words were polite. The tone was not. I nodded, forcing a small smile. That's my goal. For the rest of the session, I could feel her eyes on me, watching the way I adjusted his arm, the way I steadied his steps, the way my hand lingered on his back. Every move felt exposed, every touch judged. My palms sweated, but I couldn't stop touching him. My job demanded it, and maybe a part of me wanted her to see. When it was finally over, I excused myself quickly, nearly stumbling over my own feet to get out. My chest felt like it was caving in as I hurried down the hall. I should have felt relief, but instead, my body buzzed with something sharper. Fear, yes, but also excitement. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her eyes. The way she had looked at me, not with outright accusation, but with knowing suspicion. Like she could see through my skin, straight into the thoughts I didn't want to admit. I hated that it thrilled me. The next day, when I returned, Daniel was already smiling when I walked in. "You're nervous," he said softly. After I fumbled with the equipment. "I'm not," I snapped, too fast. His smile widened, like he knew the truth. "She saw something yesterday." I froze, staring at him. "She didn't," I said, though even to me it sounded weak. He leaned closer, his voice low. "If you'd pulled your hand away slower, she might have thought something else." My face flamed. "Don't," I whispered, harsher than I meant. But he only chuckled, shifting his weight as if to test how far he could push. Later that week, I thought I was alone after a session. I packed my bag, ready to leave, when I heard heels clicking softly on the floor. I turned, and there she was again, Laura, leaning against the doorframe. She wasn't smiling. "You're very attentive," she said, her voice calm but cutting. My throat tightened. "I'm just doing my job." Her head tilted slightly, her eyes narrowing. Of course. I waited for her to say more, to accuse me, to demand I leave. But she didn't. She just watched me, silent, until the weight of her gaze forced me to look away. Finally, she stepped aside. "I'll let you get back to it," she murmured, but her tone lingered like smoke, heavy and impossible to ignore. I left in a rush, my hands shaking. That night, I admitted something to myself I hadn't wanted to before. Part of me wanted her to look at me like that. Part of me wanted her to see, to suspect, to know. It was wrong. It was reckless. But the danger of it made my blood run hotter, made my chest pound harder. And I knew, even if I tried, I wasn't pulling away from this anymore. Not from him, not from her eyes. I told myself I wouldn't come back. After the way his wife looked at me, after the way Daniel smirked like he enjoyed it, I swore I'd draw a line. I swore I'd stay behind it. But the next morning, I was there again, walking into that same room, my stomach tight, my chest buzzing with something between dread and desire. Daniel was waiting for me, as always. But this time, he didn't look tired. He looked alive, stronger, more deliberate. Like every day, he was reclaiming a piece of himself, and every piece he reclaimed made me weaker. "You came back," he said softly, his lips curving. "It's my job," I answered quickly, trying to keep my voice steady. He only smiled, that steady, knowing smile that made me feel stripped bare. We started with stretches, my hands on his shoulders, guiding him through the slow pull of muscle and bone. I tried to keep my voice even, counting, steady. But the moment I pressed into his back to correct his posture, I felt him shift, closer, warmer. "You're too tense," I murmured. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's you." I froze, my palms flat against his shoulder blades. "Don't," I whispered. He only chuckled under his breath. Later, as we moved on to leg work, I guided him to the chair for support. He hesitated before sitting. "Show me how," he said, his tone quiet but laced with something heavier. "Show me," he repeated. I sighed, exasperated, and moved closer. But when he shifted, his hand found my wrist, tugging me just slightly off balance. In an instant, I landed half on him, his lap firm under me, his arm at my waist to steady me. My breath caught. "Careful," he murmured, his mouth dangerously close to my ear. I should have bolted up immediately, but I didn't. My body froze, my pulse thundering in my throat, every nerve lit up by the heat of his palm pressing lightly against my hip. "I'm fine," I whispered, though nothing about me was fine. "Are you?" he asked, his breath warm against my cheek. For a moment, it felt like the world narrowed to just that. His hand, my body, the space between our lips that shrank with every second I didn't move. I could feel his heartbeat through his chest, steady and strong. My own heart was a wild, frantic drum in response. My lips parted before I even realized it. And then, knock. The sharp rap on the door snapped the spell. I scrambled to my feet, almost tripping over the strap on the floor. My cheeks burned so hot I thought they might scorch through my skin. A nurse peeked in, smiling. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said too quickly, too brightly. "Everything's fine." She nodded, disappearing as fast as she'd come. When I turned back, Daniel was watching me, his eyes heavy, his mouth curved in something between amusement and hunger. "If she hadn't knocked," he said softly, "what would have happened?" "Nothing," I snapped, grabbing the chart with trembling hands. "Absolutely nothing." But the way he looked at me said he didn't believe that for a second. And worse, the way my body still ached said maybe he was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. The weight of his lap beneath me, the pressure of his hand at my waist, the way my lips had parted, unbidden, waiting, almost begging for something that never came. I hated it. I hated him for making me feel it. And I hated myself most of all for wanting it. But I couldn't deny it anymore. He had found the crack in my wall, and he was widening it every single day. The next session, I tried harder. I kept my distance. Barely touched him except when absolutely necessary. I counted faster, rushed the stretches, avoided his eyes. He noticed. Of course he did. "You're different today," he said casually as I adjusted the strap on his wrist. "I'm fine," I muttered. "You're avoiding me." "I'm not." His fingers curled, deliberately brushing mine as I worked the strap. I jerked back too fast, fumbling the equipment. He caught it with one hand, steady and calm, while I struggled to breathe. "You can lie to yourself," he said softly, "but I see it." My chest squeezed. "Stop." He tilted his head, the faintest smirk at his lips. "Tell me you don't feel it. Just once. Say it." But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, because even if I said them, they'd be a lie. I turned away, shoving the weights back into the bag with shaking hands. "Tomorrow," he murmured behind me, his voice so low I almost didn't hear it. "You'll stop pretending." When I left, my legs felt weak. The air outside the house tasted thin. My skin still burned where his hand had been, where his eyes had lingered. I wanted to run. I wanted to quit, to tell myself this was over. But the truth was, part of me didn't want it to end. Part of me wanted to see what tomorrow would bring. That was the most dangerous part, because it wasn't just him testing boundaries anymore. It was me. I should have quit. After the way he pulled me into his lap, after the way my body betrayed me, I knew it was spiraling out of control. Every line I swore I'd never cross was blurring. But instead of walking away, I walked back into that house, into that room, into his eyes. And that's when she caught me. Not in the act, not with his hand on my waist or my lips hovering too close, but with something worse. Her quiet calculation. Laura was waiting for me in the hallway when I arrived one morning. No warning, no smile. Just leaning against the wall, arms crossed, her gaze sharp enough to slice. "Emily," she said smoothly, like she'd been practicing. "Mrs. Harris," I replied, forcing a professional tone. My palms were already damp. "Walk with me." It wasn't a question. I followed her down the corridor, past the room where Daniel was waiting. My heart thudded against my ribs, each step heavier than the last. We stopped in a small sitting room, sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. It should have felt warm, safe. It didn't. She shut the door behind us. "You're good with him," she said, her voice calm, almost flat. "Thank you," I murmured. Her eyes didn't soften. "Maybe too good." My throat tightened. I don't... She cut me off with a flick of her hand, graceful but firm. Don't play dumb with me. I've been married to Daniel long enough to know when he's distracted. I froze. She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood, her presence filling the space between us. You think I didn't notice? The way he looks at you. The way you pretend not to notice back. I'm just his caregiver, I insisted. Though the words tasted hollow, her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder. Do you know how many times I've heard that before? Before I could respond, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Thin, manila, ominous. She held it out to me. Go on, look. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy, candid shots of Daniel. Some with women, different women. One in a restaurant, his hand too close to someone else's. Another outside a hotel, his smile wide, his arm around a stranger's waist, and text messages, printed out, crude and intimate. Words I couldn't imagine him saying out loud but could hear in his voice. My stomach turned. This is who he is, she said softly. He seduces, he manipulates, he takes, and he doesn't stop until you're tangled so deep you can't climb out. I flipped through the pages, bile rising in my throat. He'd done this before, many times. I wasn't special. I was just next. But what unsettled me more was the flicker of recognition in my chest, the way my body remembered his hand on my hip, his breath on my cheek. Even knowing he'd said the same words, touched the same way, with someone else, it didn't erase the ache inside me. Laura watched my face carefully, like she was measuring every reaction. Then she leaned in, her voice lower. I know what he does. I know how he looks at you. And I know you feel it too. Her words sank like a blade. I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came out. You can lie to yourself, she continued, but don't lie to me. Silence stretched between us. My pulse roared in my ears. Finally, she straightened, her tone shifting. Here's the truth, Emily. Men like Daniel, they thrive on secrets. They think they hold all the power. Her eyes narrowed. But we don't have to play by his rules. I stared at her, not understanding. What do you mean? Her lips curved slightly, the faintest hint of a smile now, but it was sharp, dangerous. I mean, we can use it, his weakness, his hunger. We can turn it against him. A chill ran through me. You don't have to decide now, she interrupted smoothly. But think about it. You've already seen the way he looks at you. He won't stop. And when he doesn't, you'll be the one holding the leverage, not him. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. Then she leaned closer, so close I could smell her perfume, light and expensive, nothing like me. Her eyes locked on mine, steady, unblinking. Or, she whispered, you can keep pretending you're just his caregiver and let him ruin you like he ruined the rest. The words lodged deep in me, heavy, suffocating. When she finally stepped back, I realized my hands were still clutching the folder, knuckles white. Think about it, she said one last time, her tone smooth as silk. Then she turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the weight of what she'd given me. That night, I spread the photographs across my bed, staring at each one until my vision blurred. My body ached with the memory of his touch, even as my stomach churned at the proof of his betrayals. I should have felt nothing but disgust. I should have burned every page, closed the folder, and walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I lay there, trembling, caught between two truths I couldn't reconcile. I knew he was dangerous, and I still wanted him. I told myself I'd keep my distance. After Laura handed me that folder, after I saw what he'd done to other women, I swore I'd build the wall back up, that I'd stay professional, untouchable, immune. But the next time I stepped into his room, I knew I'd already failed. Daniel was sitting up, his eyes sharp, his mouth curved in that half smile that made me feel naked, stronger now, more in control. And the way he looked at me, like I was his next move in some game only he knew the rules to, made my body light up even as my mind screamed, "No." "You've been avoiding me," he said softly. "I haven't," I muttered, setting down the weights. "You have," he pressed. "Why?" "Because this is getting complicated," I whispered, avoiding his gaze. Silence stretched. Then I felt his hand brush mine as I adjusted the strap on his arm. Not a clumsy slip, a deliberate graze. I flinched, but didn't pull away fast enough. "You feel it too," he murmured. My throat tightened. "Stop." But I didn't move, and he didn't stop. Halfway through the session, I guided him into a standing exercise. He leaned too heavily on me, on purpose. I realized a second too late. My body pressed against his breath warm against my temple. "Careful," I said, though my voice broke. His hand slid from my shoulder, down to my arm, lingering too long. Then lower, hovering at my waist, not quite grasping, not quite letting go. "I'm fine," he said. But the way he said it wasn't about balance. I tried to step back, but he caught me, quick and firm, pulling me against him. "Daniel." Before I could protest, his mouth was on mine. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't testing. It was full, hungry. Like he'd been waiting for this moment and couldn't hold back any longer. My body went rigid at first. I should have shoved him away. I should have screamed. But then my lips parted without permission, and for a terrible, beautiful second, I kissed him back. My heart hammered so loud it drowned everything else. His hand tightened at my waist, drawing me closer, deepening the kiss. The taste of him filled me, his warmth swallowing me whole. And then reality crashed in. I tore myself away, stumbling back, my fingers pressed to my lips, shaking. "What are you doing?" I hissed. His eyes burned into me, calm and steady. "What we've both wanted." "No," I said, but it sounded weak. My body betrayed me, still trembling, still aching for more. "Yes," he countered softly, almost gently. "You kissed me back." My chest caved. I had no defense. The worst part wasn't that he kissed me. It was that I wanted him to do it again. That night, I replayed it in the dark, my body restless, my lips tingling like the imprint of him was still there. I hated myself for it. I hated him more for knowing me better than I knew myself. But the next day, I came back. This time, he didn't wait. The moment I touched him, just a simple adjustment of his posture, he caught my wrist and pulled me close. "Daniel, stop." "You don't want me to stop," he said, his voice low, certain. I tried to pull away, but he leaned in, his lips brushing the edge of my jaw, so close my knees nearly buckled. I could feel the heat of him, smell the faint salt of his skin. And then the door opened. My heart stopped. Laura. She stood in the doorway, her eyes flicking from him to me, her expression unreadable. For one suspended second, I thought she'd scream, rage, throw me out. But instead, she smiled. Not a kind smile, a cold one, knowing. "Am I interrupting?" she asked smoothly. I stumbled back. my face on fire. I was just leaving, she finished for me, her tone sweet as poison. I grabbed my bag, stammering something I couldn't even hear, and rushed out. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My lips still burned, my skin still tingled where his hands had been. But all I could see was her smile. That smile that said she'd seen enough, and she wasn't shocked. She was waiting. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it all, his kiss, her eyes, that smile. I didn't know which one haunted me more. The next day, I tried to avoid him. I took longer routes, filled my hours with other tasks. But by midday, there was another message waiting for me. He requested you. Only you. I should have said no. I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself at his door again, my heart thundering. He was sitting up, waiting. His eyes locked on me like he'd known I'd come. "Emily," he said softly. I didn't answer. I set down the equipment, keeping my distance. But distance doesn't last. Not with him. As soon as I adjusted his band, he leaned forward so close I could feel the brush of his breath on my neck. My whole body froze. "She won't stop us," he whispered. I jerked back, shaking my head. "This is wrong." His lips curved, dark amusement in his eyes. "But you don't want it to stop." And the terrible truth was, I didn't. When I finally escaped that room, I walked straight into Laura. She was standing just outside, waiting like she knew I'd come out shaken. Our eyes met. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't demand an explanation. She just looked at me, then smiled again, cool, amused, in control. That was the moment I realized something worse than Daniel wanting me. His wife wanted this too. Not the affair, not the kiss, but the game. And I was the piece they were both moving. I kept telling myself I would stop. After the kiss, after the way his wife caught us and smiled like she'd been waiting for it, I swore that was the end. I couldn't let myself be dragged any deeper into their mess. But wanting to stop and actually stopping are two very different things, because the truth is, I didn't stop. I thought about it constantly. The weight of his hand at my waist, the heat of his mouth pressed against mine. The look in his wife's eyes, calm, sharp, almost entertained. I'd never felt so alive and so terrified at the same time, and I couldn't shake it. Every day, I told myself I'd quit, and every day, I found myself walking back into that house. One afternoon, I walked in determined to keep it professional. I forced my smile. I counted out the stretches. I touched him only when necessary. I thought I was doing well, but then he caught my hand mid-motion and held it there. "Emily," he said quietly, "why do you keep pretending?" My throat tightened. "Because it's wrong." His fingers slid against mine, slow, deliberate. "But it feels right, doesn't it?" I pulled my hand back like it burned, but my body shook with the truth of it. Later, when I packed my things to leave, I saw her again, Laura, standing near the door, waiting. "Everything okay?" she asked sweetly, her voice too calm. I nodded quickly, but my cheeks flushed hot. She stepped closer, her perfume filling the space between us. "You're not the first," she whispered, "but you could be the last." I didn't know what she meant, and maybe I didn't want to know. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone clutched in my hand. I shouldn't have been waiting for it, but I was. And sure enough, the message came. "I need you." 2 words. Simple. Heavy. dangerous. I dropped the phone on my chest and covered my face with my hands. My body ached with want. My mind screamed at me to run. But the truth was, I wanted to answer. I wanted to go back. I'd never felt a hunger like this before, not with anyone, not even with men I loved. It wasn't romance. It wasn't sweetness. It was fire. Reckless. Consuming. Forbidden. The kind of fire that scorches everything it touches. And I knew it would burn me alive. But I also knew part of me wanted to see how far it would go before it did. People like to believe life is simple, that good choices and bad choices are clear. That temptation can be resisted if you're strong enough. But I don't think it's that easy. Not when your body betrays you. Not when your heart pounds out of rhythm every time a pair of eyes lock onto yours. Not when you taste something forbidden and realize you can't untaste it. Daniel was dangerous. His wife was worse. And me? I was caught in the middle. Too weak to run. Too drawn to resist. So maybe I'm not innocent. Maybe I never was. I'm just someone who stepped too close to the fire. And once you feel that heat, you can't go back to the cold. I don't know how this ends. Maybe I'll walk away tomorrow, delete his messages, and never step foot in that house again. Or maybe I'll answer. Maybe I'll go back, knowing exactly what I'm walking into. Because even now, as I confess this, even now as shame curls in my stomach, I can't lie. I still want him. And maybe that's the real danger, wanting something you know could destroy you, but reaching for it anyway. Or if you were in her place, what would you do? Would you walk away? Or would you go back to the fire knowing it could burn you alive? Tell me in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe for more forbidden dramas and confessions like this. New episodes every week.